everybody, and welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Zach Drew. Let me tell you right now, today is going to be a fun one. We're going to be diving deep into certain things that you have probably never heard before, and some of it is going to be pretty shocking. So I'll go ahead and start off by saying we all know our education system in America is a mess, right? But I don't think you could even guess just how big of a mess it actually is. So I picked up this book about 5 years ago. The first half of the program is going to be coming directly from this work here, a book with footnotes longer than some books. So basically, I was reading through the news this week, and we are going to be talking about some of that on today's show, including a couple of articles. Education belongs in the states, not Washington. Some powerful points made in here, and even better commentary from yours truly. Trump slashes and burns through Department of Education. Really important articles. We're going to be getting into those. It all ties together. And basically, as I was going through the news this week, it reminded me of some of the absolute truth bombs Glenn Beck detonated in his work called Arguing with Socialists, especially when he did a deep dive on the sky-high tuition at colleges across America. And, you know, to those of you that are in the deep blue states in metropolitan areas, you might be saying, yeah, okay, Zach, but, thanks to the greedy capitalists, millions of young people are buried in student debt. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Because you can blame the government for all of this. Blame the government? What? Hey, how about we cue this video real quick? Surprise, surprise, we can blame the government for this? Yes, absolutely. Most student loans issued in the United States over the past decade have been by the federal government. So it makes no sense to blame capitalists, those operating in the free market, for a problem that is being perpetuated by government bureaucrats. Things I didn't know before reading this book for 500, please. I didn't know when you look at the terrifying rising costs of student lending, it can all be traced back to the creation of the Federal Family Education Loan Program, FFEL, in 1965. All in this book. You need to get it. It's incredible. And as Glenn Beck says, another one of President Lyndon Johnson's mind-numbingly stupid reforms. Under the FFEL program, the federal government agreed to pay subsidies to private banks issuing college loans. Unbelievable. The federal government also agreed to, are you ready for this? Guarantee the loans for banks. Meaning that if, a student were to default on the loan, the government would pick up the tab, not the bank. Did you know that? And at first, like most government programs, the Federal Family Education Loan Program was meant to help lower income people gain access to affordable loans that they otherwise wouldn't be able to obtain. Makes sense. But over time, the federal government went ahead and expanded the program to virtually everybody. Once again, please cue Cilla Black. And once again, I guess behind door number, whatever door you choose to pick, is the government. And as Glenn stated in his book, it's not hard to imagine how this program distorted the student lending industry. With a full guarantee from the federal government, banks didn't need to worry about losing their investments, right? I mean, think about it. No matter what you charge, no matter what the universities charge, worst case scenario, default happens and banks aren't in trouble. the government will fully cover that. So they're not worried about losing their investments. Like I said, they simply offered loans to virtually every student in the country, regardless of whether they had the financial means to pay the loans back or not. Now, like I just said, what does that mean? It means schools, realizing that banks would agree to lend out more money than ever, started increasing their tuition rates and the cost of attending college. Now, why am I talking about this? Because this all ties into Trump wanting to cut the Department of Education with a nearly $100 billion annual budget, and primarily that goes to what? Tuition. So the incentives to keep costs down and make college more affordable, well, that quickly evaporated. But progressives weren't done there. I should cue Cilla Black again. Surprise, surprise, right? Weren't done there. I want to read a little bit from this book, okay? Story Hour with Zach Drew. Here we go. I'm going to read about a page in it. I'm going to be about, well, it ends up being about one page. Here we go. From Arguing with Socialists, Glenn Beck. But progressives weren't done there. In the 1980s and early 1990s, they successfully campaigned to create a pilot direct student lending program, which they promised would save taxpayers billions of dollars. They argued that by cutting out the middlemen, the banks, they could reduce costs significantly, which makes sense. Well, there's interest there. And so why not just come to us directly? We'll save a little money. We'll use those billions of dollars to give out even more tuitions to help lower income families. Sounds good and looks good on paper, right? So they argued by cutting out the middlemen, the banks, they could reduce costs and freeing up more funding for education programs that provided aid directly to lower income families. The pilot direct lending program, which was created by a Democrat-led Congress and signed into law by Republican George H.W. Bush, was later expanded dramatically by congressional Democrats and President Bill Clinton. Over time, the number of students participating in the direct student loan program grew. Yep. By 2006, about 20% of federally guaranteed loans were offered to students directly by the federal government. So around 20% in 2006, offered directly from the federal government. Spurred by the 2008 financial crisis, the Obama administration made another giant progressive leap forward. In 2010, President Obama signed into law legislation that made the federal government the nation's largest student lender, a move he promised would make higher education more affordable. How's that going for you? Instead of merely guaranteeing many students loans and providing student loans directly to a minority of students, ready for this? The Obama-era law made 100% of federal government guaranteed loans direct student loans. That means like straight from the federal government, pushing private banks almost entirely out of the lending industry. Obama and congressional Democrats also expanded the income-based repayment plans. Get a load of this. First created on a bipartisan basis in 2007, which allows students to structure their student loan payments based entirely on their income and let students who work for a nonprofit organization, including charities, colleges, and even government agencies, have their student loans forgiven after 10 years of making income-based repayments. Yes, you read that correctly. Every American student with direct student loans can have their entire student debt load wiped out by working full-time for the government for only 10 years. Indentured servitude, anyone? Have you amassed $150,000 in student loan debt pursuing a physical education degree at a ridiculously overpriced liberal arts school or liberal arts college? Or maybe you spent $100,000 getting a graduate or undergraduate degree in 18th century French women's poetry or Canadian studies or exercise and movement sciences or puppet arts. Yes, these are all real majors. No problem. Just work for your local DMV for 10 years and it will all magically disappear. And by magically disappear, I mean other people will be forced to pay for the 4 years you spent in college getting hammered at your puppeteer frat house. Get the book, guys. It's wild. You won't regret reading it. Like I said, the first full half of this show is literally directly from this book. So he says in the book that many students, they are no longer incentivized to choose an affordable college, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. They know that the federal government will give them almost any amount of money a school charges. And many of those who plan to work in public service know that they'll never have to pay back most of the money they loan out. Like I said, just work at the DMV for 10 years. Similarly, college administrators, well, now they know they can continuously raise tuition costs. All rates, all fees, and the cost of room and board, because the federal government will guarantee to provide the funding needed, even to students with little or no money, or all the money they have. It doesn't matter anymore. Does this sound familiar? It should. These perverse incentives and market manipulations are eerily similar to those that caused the 2008 recession. Presidents Johnson, George H.W. Bush, Clinton, George W. Bush, and Obama, Democrats and Republicans, all contributed to this student debt crisis, which seems to worsen every single year. Students have now collectively amassed more than $1.75 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. So just how much has tuition risen since the federal government got involved? We can take care of this. Affordable college for everybody. Well, 12% this is key, in inflation-adjusted dollars. From 1963 to 1983, that's 20 years, 12% inflation with adjusted for our current dollar value. From 83 to 2003, the next 20 years, costs skyrocketed by 78%, and that's adjusted for inflation. So how are they doing? And then from 2003 and to roughly 2018, when this, getting my content for this part of the program, when this book was being written, they increased by, in that shorter time period, 30%. So in a free market, student loans are investments, right? Contrary to what they are today. So let me ask you this before I go on to the next section of today's program. I would encourage you, if you have any young people in your family, or if you are a young person, to sit down with a family member or a mentor and discuss the pros and cons on your investment, right? Do the benefits of your degree outweigh the student debt that you're going to incur? You can't spend $100K to become a puppet art master. What is the answer to more affordable college tuition? I think Glenn made some great points. He said one great way to do this is online courses. Usually that people can take courses even in some of the leading universities. I'm talking like Harvard, Yale. Online courses for less than $100. You could work for a company that will pay for your college tuition. Like Andrew Beller's, his wife, earned her bachelor's degree in history, fully paid for through her job. Or you could just get into a trade. I'll end with this section with this quote from Glenn Beck. Making higher education more affordable is already possible. The reason it hasn't become widespread is that the government takeover of the student lending industry has removed most of the free market elements from the higher education decision-making process. Do you see how I always try to tie in history and everything to what we're seeing today? Because this is exactly why Trump is saying, I want to end the DOE, the Department of Education. It's a huge scam. Let's get into some of the news from this week to tie it all in. News from the week. So we know that, I hope you know, education is not a constitutional federal power. You know that, right? It's absolutely not. It should be 100% to the states, just as the 10th Amendment suggests. And so most of the things that we just talked about, the Department of Education, that first off, that was created in 79 under Jimmy Carter. But it is absolutely an unconstitutional bureaucracy that centralizes control. That is why it is in the aims of Doge and this current administration, and which is a radical departure from literally what defined nearly all of our nation's history, where education, it was understood to be all about the states, all about local matters. Think about the absolute garbage kids are being taught today. Much of it is pushed onto the schools by who? The unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats who control the Department of Education, the DOE. First article, Trump slashes and burns through Department of Education. Looking at the Department of Education by subcomponent for fiscal year 2025, the largest outlay by far comes from the Office of Federal Student Aid. Roughly $68 billion just on federal student loan aid. Remember when Joe Biden wanted to radically expand that? Why? Because those are his friends. The number one place the pipeline of dollars flow from permanent employees in the federal government to permanent staffers in the blue infrastructure around America is higher education, which is subsidized by the American taxpayer. It should not be. This could all be done privately, and that's how it always had been done. All of it. It would be better if it were done privately. A case I have made previously says, this is from Daily Wire, this is Ben Shapiro. The reason this would be better is because students would actually be forced to consider whether they need, his words, a degree in lesbian dance studies, as opposed to simply taking money from the federal government, subsidized over the course of 30 years to get a degree in lesbian dance studies. We've artificially inflated the necessity for a degree in this country. There are numerous jobs in this country that now require a degree but didn't before. Why? This is a good point. Because when the number of people going to college increases, the expectation that people, like business owners, the expectation that people will have gone to college increases as well, right? It's a scam. It's a massive scam. The reality is that the vast majority of colleges and universities take in high school students and turn out left-wing thinkers or people who are apathetic about politics with a degree that costs much money subsidized by taxpayer dollars. Second article, education belongs in the states, not Washington. Since the department's creation in 1979, the federal government has spent more than $6 trillion. Oh my gosh, I was one that put this in I had forgotten what that number was, $6 trillion on education. Well, we should probably be seeing some great results. Well, think again. Yet our kids aren't reading any better, solving equations any better, or competing stronger globally. The Nation's report card shows reading and math scores for 17-year-olds stuck where they were in the 1970s. Oh, wait, I thought the DOE was created in the 70s. Huh, that's weird. I think it's time again. Go ahead. Cilla Black. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, there we go. Meanwhile, administrative staff in public schools has ballooned, growing by 19 times the rate of student growth since 2000. President Trump can end the federal government's authority over education because the Constitution never granted it in the first place. I wrote down a bunch of things with bullet points, and I think it'd be better if you read it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it on the screen. The DOE, the Department of Education, is a vehicle for leftist ideology, pushing critical race theory, gender ideology and curriculum, like pronoun policies, transgender bathroom mandates, social emotional learning, SEL, that embeds political and ideological frameworks into classrooms. Understand, it's not just what the DOE funds, it's what strings are attached to that funding, what guidance it issues, and how it empowers ideological partners in the education system. Here's how it works in practical terms. The DOE issues non-binding guidance documents. These documents tell schools how to interpret federal laws. For example, the DOE has interpreted Title IX, which originally prohibited sex-based discrimination in education, now to mean that sex includes gender identity and sexual orientation. This opens the door to policies that require boys and girls bathrooms, locker rooms, and sports, or that punish schools for refusing to use preferred pronouns. And schools adopt these policies. And we're talking about K through 12 right now. This is like, well, everybody, but specifically, I'm talking here about K through 12. The schools adopt these policies oftentimes not because they believe in them, but because they fear losing federal funds. Oh, well, okay, well, and so now we move to the funding incentives. The DOE grants often reward schools and districts that implement certain equity frameworks, diversity, equity and inclusion, DEI, training programs, or social emotional learning, SEL curriculums. These programs are often based on critical theory principles, and some of the training materials have included white privilege checklists, implicit bias workshops, intersectionality-based discipline reform. The result? Federal dollars reward ideological compliant schools while punishing those that resist. Now earlier, I put this in my notes too. Earlier I mentioned SEL. SEL, which stands for Social Emotional Learning, and I put here, it is a Trojan horse. So remember that. We hear about critical race theory, it's more in the news, but SEL. So while SEL sounds innocent, it really does, teaching kids empathy, resilience. Many conservatives argue it has evolved into a vessel for ideological indoctrination. Modern SEL often includes teaching equity over equality, exploring identity and systems of oppression, embedding progressive worldview assumptions about race, gender, and power into everyday classroom interactions. And again, DOE, Department of Education, grant money is often tied to these frameworks. The point I am making is that the DOE is not just teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's teaching radicalism, rebellion, and the redefinition of reality itself, entered through postmodernism, where there is no absolute truth. Truth is fluid, ever-changing, ever-moving. You can't pin it down. That's why, well, that's your truth, that's my truth. We can have two different standards and both be right. As I start to wrap up today's program, I do want, I want to say this. Whenever we look, we see the problems. I'm in the news all the time and I see the problems, but one thing that I think we should all do, and I try to do it every single week, is, and I'm not perfect at it because sometimes I can't get down to the bottom of it. But whenever we see a problem, we need to ask ourselves, where did it start? Where are the roots of this? Because like I talked about for several minutes last show, to do anything, to really kill something, you've got to uproot it. You've got to dig within that earth and take it out at the base, at its very foundation. So if we're looking at this problem, where did it come from? And let me tell you right now, if you're a parent, a patriot, or a pastor, that's 3 Ps. Parent, patriot, pastor. Or, my ADHD just kicked in. Or, you're just simply a believer who loves this country. I want to say something to you, because it's time that we seriously wake up. America's schools were never, ever supposed to look like this. Confused children, right? Boys in the girls' bathrooms, where we promote pronouns over scripture. The woke indoctrination replacing wisdom. Let me tell you something. We did not get here by accident. I am not I don't know. I'm a student of history, and I say that very loosely because I know some guys that, man, they know every nook and cranny of every single thing that seems to have ever happened in America. But I do love history, and I do study, and I'm a student of history. And it's obvious that this nation was birthed in biblical truth. The first schools weren't founded to teach political correctness. Did you know that the first schools were founded? They were founded to teach kids how to read the Bible. Did you know that? Those were the first schools, were literally created to teach kids how to read the Bible. That is actually our American history. Harvard's mission, when it was established, was to know God and Jesus Christ. The New England Primer taught our children the ABCs with verses like in Adam's fall, we sinned all. The 10 Commandments were on classroom walls, not rainbow flags. You didn't have to be scared to be a Christian. You didn't have to whisper prayers. Prayer was spoken out loud, not silenced in shame. So what happened? We kicked God out. In 1962, the Supreme Court banned prayer. In 1963, they banned Bible reading. We look at all the problems. Just look at the in American increments. You can see it started here. In 1980, they banned the 10 Commandments because they feared students might read them and obey them. Imagine that. Our courts feared obedience to God more than they feared rebellion everywhere else. And now what do we have? We have chaos, total confusion. When you take truth out, it's a biblical concept. Lies fill the vacuum. That it's how God made this world. When you take the truth out of something, there is a vacuum, and lies fill that vacuum when you take the truth out. When you take God out, darkness rushes in. The Department of Education has become a tool. And so many people in America are so blind. They're like, yeah, the tool is for academic excellence. No, it's not. It's for ideological conquest. They use funding as a weapon to push CRT, as gender confusion, anti-parent policies, and everything, every woke indoctrination. You want the truth? The DOE has become a gatekeeper of progressive immorality. And all of it is by design. The enemy knew. The enemy knew. If you want to destroy a nation, you start by capturing the minds of its children. And that's exactly what's happening in classrooms all across this country. But I want to tell you this, and I truly believe this, it's not too late. And I say it and I believe it, and it's not just because I'm biased, because I have two young kids right now. I truly believe it is not too late. We have to fight. We must fight for things like school choice. We've got to get behind the right school board candidate. And let me tell you right now, these aren't just words of mine. I am very active, very active. I'm on the board of an organization called Restore Our Constitution. We actually are meeting again this Tuesday at the Decatur Conference Center, and that's exactly what we do. We endorse people. We get behind people. We try. We go to the school libraries. We have all the candidates running in this area, and even within our state, to come and speak. We've got to get behind school board candidates. We must end the Department of Education and take back the children's education. Because if we don't, we lose. If we don't, we will lose everything. Not just a generation, but we will lose literally the soul of this nation. I'm out of time. America needs revival, but it must start with us. identifying the problems, asking the Holy Spirit to convict our hearts. It begins putting God back where he belongs, in our homes, in our schools, in the classrooms. I'm out of time for today, and I was supposed to say it up top. Go to zachdrewshow.com and get behind us. If you believe in what we're doing, we really want to grow. We really want to be in more homes. We really want to have a bigger impact. If you're still here, you watch the whole program. Don't you wish everybody you know could simply just listen to this content? A program that deals with everything that's happening in America, but through a Christian biblical perspective. We can't do that, unfortunately, without people standing with us. And because I hate money, but money is what makes everything possible to expand. And I'm praying that God would use you to get behind us in big ways. Go to zachdrewshow.com and click that bright orange donate button. Or you can write us at Zach Drew Show. That's P.O. Box 797, Decatur, Illinois, 62525. Stand with us. You are literally the backbone of this entire ministry. You are. We can't do it without God, and we can't do it without his faithful people standing with us. I'll see you next week.